Native girl wept all my life, I've only stirred pots. What lonely cowboy did next changed everything. Marissa had lived in the small town of Red Willow all her life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and where days passed slowly, like the sun crawling across the sky in summer. The streets were dusty and the buildings were mostly old, their paint peeling from years of harsh wind and sun. Yet there was a quiet charm to the town. People waved to each other on the street. Neighbors borrowed sugar and eggs freely, and the smell of fresh bread often drifted from the local bakery in the morning. Marissa's life, however, felt very different from the town itself. While the world outside bustled in small, familiar ways, her own days felt like a repetitive circle. From sunrise to sunset, she was busy in the diner her family had run for decades. The place was small, with red vinyl booths that squeaked when you sat, and a long counter where regular customers perched, sipping coffee and chatting. The walls were decorated with old photographs, most of them black and white, showing her ancestors smiling in front of the diner. To her, they seemed like silent witnesses, reminding her of the life she was living, a life that felt both safe and lonely. Her mornings began early, often before the town even stirred. She would pull on her apron, tie her hair back, and light the stove. The kitchen smelled of frying bacon, freshly brewed coffee, and bread that had risen overnight. Marissa liked the smells. They were comforting. Yet they reminded her, in a quiet way, of how small her world was. Day after day, she prepared the same meals, cleaned the same counters, and served the same people. Sometimes, while wiping the tables, she would hear her own voice whisper, "All my life I've only stirred pots," and feel a pang deep in her chest. It was a simple phrase, but it held all her sadness, her longing, and her wish that life could be more than this. The people of Red Willow loved Marissa. She had a gentle way of listening, a soft smile that could ease any worry, and a laugh that came naturally when she was around those she liked. Children adored her because she always had a kind word or a sweet treat. Travelers who stopped at the diner often commented on her warm hospitality. But while others saw her as helpful, caring, or even talented, Marissa saw herself as invisible, a quiet shadow moving through a world she never truly felt part of. Her dreams of adventure and excitement had slowly faded into memories of stories her grandmother used to tell about faraway places and daring journeys. Those stories had once made her heart race with curiosity, but now they felt like distant echoes she could almost, but not quite, reach. Her family understood her in their own way. Her mother, who had taught her everything about cooking, often reminded her that a steady life was a blessing. "There's pride in keeping a home and serving people well," her mother would say, patting her shoulder. Her father, a quiet man with calloused hands, would nod in agreement, though he rarely spoke much. Marissa knew they meant well. They wanted her to be safe, to live without hardship, and to honor the family tradition. But sometimes the weight of expectation pressed on her like the heavy iron skillet she used to cook eggs. She wanted more, though she didn't yet know what that more could be. Most days her life was predictable. The diner opened at 6 in the morning, and the first customers arrived almost immediately. Farmers stopped by for a quick coffee and toast before heading to their fields. Shopkeepers came in for a moment of rest between busy hours. The postman always paused for a cup of coffee and a chat. Marissa served them all with the same care, remembering each person's favorite dish or drink. She knew the regulars so well that she could anticipate their orders before they spoke. While some might find that repetitive, Marissa took pride in her skill. But as night fell and the last customer left, she often sat alone at a corner table, the diner silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. The quiet would press in on her, and she would feel the sting of loneliness, as if the world outside the diner was moving on without her. Evenings were her own, though she rarely knew what to do with them. Sometimes she walked along the edges of town, where the fields began and the horizon stretched wide and empty. She loved the wind against her face and the sound of crickets singing in the dark. Those walks gave her a brief sense of freedom, a feeling that she could step out of her routine and breathe in something bigger. But eventually she always returned home, to her room with its simple furniture and walls lined with shelves of cookbooks and old journals. She would sometimes write in the journals, jotting down thoughts she didn't share with anyone. They were a mix of recipes, memories, and dreams she wasn't ready to speak aloud. Marissa's solitude wasn't complete sadness. She loved the little joys of life, the warmth of a cup of tea in the morning, the laughter of children in the diner, the sight of a bird landing on the windowsill. But even these small joys carried a quiet melancholy, a reminder that while she could care for others, she didn't always feel cared for in return. Her heart yearned for connection, for a life that would make her feel seen and valued beyond her skill with a spoon or a spatula. Her thoughts often wandered to what might lie beyond Red Willow. She imagined cities with bright lights and endless streets, mountains she had never climbed, and rivers wide enough to lose herself in. Sometimes she pictured meeting someone who understood her, someone whose presence would make her feel alive in ways she had never experienced. But those thoughts were fleeting, like clouds drifting across the sky, beautiful yet unreachable. It was during one of these quiet evenings that a sense of restlessness gripped her more strongly than ever. She sat at her window, watching the sun sink behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She held a cup of tea, its warmth a small comfort, and whispered again, "All my life I've only stirred pots." The words were both a confession and a plea, a wish that life could change, that something unexpected might come and sweep her out of her quiet routine. Little did Marissa know, change was approaching. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a figure traveled the long, dusty trails leading to Red Willow. He was a man who carried his own loneliness, a man whose life had been shaped by solitude and long stretches of empty land. And though neither of them knew it yet, their lives were about to intersect in a way that would awaken Marissa's heart and show her that life was capable of far more than stirring pots in a quiet diner. Until then, she remained in her world of quiet routines and small comforts, unaware that the first thread of a new story was already weaving its way toward her. Every stir of her spoon, every dish she cleaned, every kind word she offered, these small acts were preparing her for the unexpected journey ahead. She just didn't know it yet. The night grew deeper, and the town of Red Willow settled into its usual hush. Marissa sat by the window a little longer, watching stars appear one by one, feeling a strange mix of hope and melancholy. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt the faintest glimmer that life might be bigger than the walls of the diner, bigger than the pots she stirred, and bigger than the small town she had always called home. The next morning, Red Willow began its usual routine. The sun peeked over the hills, casting golden light on the dusty streets, birds chirped in the trees, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifted from the bakery across the street. Marissa was already in the diner, tying her apron and preparing the first pot of coffee for the morning crowd. She moved with practiced ease, flipping eggs, warming biscuits, and arranging the condiments on the tables. It was a quiet rhythm, comforting but predictable, the kind of rhythm she had known all her life. Just as the first customers started to arrive, the sound of hooves clattering on the dirt road caught her attention. Marissa looked up and noticed a figure approaching on horseback. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders hidden under a worn leather jacket. His hat cast a shadow over his face, but there was a quiet strength in the way he rode. The horse seemed steady and calm, guided by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Marissa felt a strange curiosity stir in her chest. She had seen travelers before, but there was something different about this man. The rider dismounted carefully, swinging his legs over the side of the horse with ease. He looked around the small town as if assessing it, yet his eyes lingered for a moment on the diner. He walked toward the door with long, purposeful strides, and when he pushed it open, a small bell rang above him. The warmth and smell of the diner reached him instantly, and he paused, taking in the scene. "Good morning," Marissa said, her voice polite but curious. "What can I get you?" "Coffee," the man replied in a calm, even tone. "And whatever you recommend for breakfast." Marissa nodded and began preparing his order. She moved quickly but gracefully, pouring the coffee, toasting the bread, and frying eggs just the way she thought he might like. There was something about him that made her want to do her best, even though she didn't know why. When she set the plate and coffee in front of him, he gave a small, almost shy nod of thanks. "This smells amazing," he said, taking a careful sip of the coffee. His voice was gentle but had a strength to it, like someone who had faced many challenges and come through stronger. They spoke briefly at first, exchanging small pleasantries. He introduced himself as Luke, a cowboy who had been traveling for months. He had no particular destination, just following the trails and seeing where life took him. Marissa listened, fascinated by the idea of traveling so freely, of waking up in a new place every day, of living without the walls and routines that had enclosed her entire life. Luke noticed something in her as he ate. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes, a longing that spoke of dreams left unspoken. He didn't push, didn't ask questions too soon. He simply ate, occasionally glancing at her with a look that was both curious and understanding. Marissa felt a strange warmth in his gaze, like someone was seeing more than just her role in the diner. It was as if he could see her heart, the part she had hidden even from herself. Over the next few days, Luke returned to the diner at almost the same time each morning. He sat at the counter, chatting with the regulars, listening to their stories and sharing a few tales of his own adventures. Marissa found herself looking forward to his visits, though she didn't fully understand why. There was something comforting about his presence, yet exciting at the same time. It made her feel as though a window had been opened in her life, letting in fresh air she didn't know she had missed. One morning, as the diner quieted down after the breakfast rush, Luke lingered a little longer. He watched Marissa clean the counter, noticing the careful attention she gave to every detail. Finally, he spoke, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "You're very good at what you do," he said. "You have a way of making people feel at home." Marissa smiled faintly, but her eyes grew sad. "I've been doing this all my life," she admitted softly. "Sometimes it feels like all I've ever done is stir pots and serve people. I love cooking, but I want something more, something different. I just don't know what it is." Luke nodded as if he understood completely. "I've been alone a long time," he said. "I travel, I work hard, I face the days as they come. But sometimes I wonder if there's more I'm missing, too. Life has a way of keeping us in our routines until something, or someone, comes along to shake things up." Marissa looked at him, surprised by how deeply she connected with his words. She felt a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years, a tiny flicker of possibility that life could change. She wanted to ask him more, to understand how someone could live freely and still face the loneliness she felt so often. But before she could speak, the bell above the door jingled, and a group of children ran in, laughing and asking for pancakes. The moment passed, but the feeling lingered in her heart. As the days went on, Luke shared more of his stories with her. He told her about the mountains he had climbed, the rivers he had crossed, the towns he had visited, and the people he had met. Each story was filled with adventure, struggle, and sometimes humor. Marissa listened with wide eyes, imagining herself in those places, living a life full of experience instead of routine. In return, Marissa began to open up to him. She told him about her family, the diner, and the dreams she had once held. She spoke of the quiet longing she felt for something beyond Red Willow, of the nights she spent staring at the stars and imagining a different life. Luke listened without judgment, encouraging her gently, asking questions that made her think about what she truly wanted. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Luke made a suggestion that surprised her. "You have a gift, Marissa," he said, "not just in cooking, but in the way you care for people. You could see the world if you wanted to. I know it's scary, but maybe it's time to try something different, even for a little while. Come with me, see what's out there." Marissa's heart raced. She wanted to say yes, to break free from the routine that had held her for so long. But fear and doubt crowded in. She thought of her family, the diner, and the life she had always known. She didn't know if she was brave enough to leave. Luke seemed to understand her hesitation. "You don't have to decide today," he said gently, "but just know that the world is bigger than this town, bigger than the walls around you. You don't have to live your life stirring pots if you don't want to. There's more waiting for you, if you're ready to take it." Marissa nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. She had spent so long wishing for change, and now it was standing right in front of her, offering her a choice. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she imagined herself stepping outside the diner, riding along trails she had only dreamed of, and discovering what life could truly be. The days that followed were filled with small changes. Marissa began thinking more seriously about her life and what she wanted. She continued her work at the diner, but she carried a new sense of possibility in her heart. She noticed details in the town she had never paid attention to before. The way the light hit the hills at sunset, the sound of the wind in the trees, the kindness in the eyes of strangers. Everything seemed sharper, more vibrant, as if the world itself was calling her to something greater. Luke continued to visit, offering gentle encouragement and sharing stories that made her laugh, think, and sometimes even cry. Their friendship deepened, built on shared understanding and quiet moments of connection. Marissa realized that the loneliness she had carried for so long was beginning to lift, replaced by the excitement of what might come next. One morning, as she poured coffee for the first customers, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Something in her had shifted. She wasn't just stirring pots anymore. She was imagining a life where she could truly be herself, where her skills and dreams mattered beyond the diner. She looked up at the horizon and thought of Luke, and for the first time she felt that change was possible. The quiet town of Red Willow continued its daily routine, unaware that two lives were quietly intertwining in a way that would forever alter them both. Marissa, the girl who had always stirred pots, and Luke, the lonely cowboy, were on the edge of a journey that would take them far beyond the familiar streets and dusty fields. And though neither of them knew exactly what lay ahead, they could feel it in their hearts, the stirring of a new life, full of possibility, connection, and discovery. The days passed quietly in Red Willow, but Marissa felt something new stirring inside her. Every time Luke came to the diner, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. she could not quite explain. He had become more than a visitor. He was a presence that made her heart race and her thoughts wander. The routine of her life, which had once felt comfortable and safe, now seemed small and confining, and for the first time in many years, she wondered what it might feel like to step beyond it. One afternoon, after the lunch crowd had left and the diner hummed with the quiet sound of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock, Luke stayed behind. He leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee slowly, and watched Marissa clear the last of the dishes. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room, and the dust motes floated like tiny sparks in the golden light. "You've been thinking a lot these days," Luke said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, steady, but there was curiosity in his eyes. Marissa paused, holding a plate in her hands. She felt the weight of truth pressing on her. "I have," she admitted softly. "I can't stop thinking about everything. About my life, about this town, about me. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, but I don't know which way to go." Luke nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "I've been there," he said. "Sometimes you spend so long following the same routine that it feels safe, but you also feel trapped. You wonder what life could be if you were brave enough to take a step in a new direction." Marissa set the plate down and leaned on the counter. She felt a lump in her throat, the kind that comes when someone sees your heart before you've had a chance to hide it. "I've spent my whole life stirring pots, taking care of people, doing what I was expected to do. And I love that. I really do. But I can't help thinking there's more for me somewhere, something I haven't even imagined yet." Luke smiled gently. "And maybe there is. You don't have to decide everything right now, but the fact that you're feeling this shows that your heart is ready for something new." Marissa's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming mix of hope and fear. She had never spoken her deepest feelings to anyone before, and it was both frightening and freeing to finally share them. She realized that Luke wasn't judging her. He wasn't offering advice that felt forced or impatient. He was simply listening, and in that simple act, he was giving her the courage to face her own desires. "I've always wanted to see the world," she whispered, "but I've been too scared." Too scared of leaving everything behind. Too scared that I'll fail or that I won't belong anywhere else. Luke leaned closer, his voice soft and steady. "Fear is natural," he said. "It doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It just means you're aware of what's at stake. You can still take small steps. You don't have to leap blindly. But you can begin." Marissa looked down at her hands, which were still damp from washing dishes. For the first time, she felt a sense of possibility. Maybe she could begin. Maybe she could step outside her routine without losing herself completely. She thought of the open trails, the mountains, the rivers, and the towns Luke had described. The images painted themselves vividly in her mind, filling her chest with a strange, thrilling mix of hope and fear. Luke continued, "I don't want to rush you, Marissa. I just want you to know that the world is bigger than this diner, bigger than these streets. There's life waiting for you if you choose to reach for it. And you're not alone. You don't have to be." Something inside her shifted. She realized that she had spent so long thinking she was alone, that her small life in Red Willow was all she could ever know. But hearing Luke speak so calmly, so sincerely, made her believe that there could be more. It was as if he had opened a door she had forgotten existed. Over the next few days, Luke continued to visit. Their conversations grew deeper, moving from stories of travel and adventure to thoughts about dreams, fears, and the future. He asked gentle questions that made her think about who she really was and what she truly wanted. He listened when she hesitated, never pushing, never forcing, just letting her find the words at her own pace. Marissa found herself sharing things she had never told anyone: memories from childhood, hopes she had buried, and even moments of quiet regret. She told him about her grandmother's stories of faraway lands, of the mountains she had never climbed, the rivers she had never crossed, and the towns she had only seen in pictures. Luke listened, nodding and smiling, encouraging her to keep speaking, encouraging her to see that her dreams were valid, no matter how long they had been waiting. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of pink and orange, Luke made a suggestion that took her breath away. "What if you didn't have to stay in this town all your life?" he asked gently. "What if you took a chance, even just for a little while, and saw the world with your own eyes? You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be ready. You just have to take the first step." Marissa's heart raced. The idea of leaving was terrifying, but also thrilling. For years she had dreamed of adventure, of something beyond the diner, but fear had always held her back. Now, standing there with Luke, she felt a strange courage rising inside her. Maybe she could leave, even if just for a short time, to see what was out there. I don't know if I can," she said honestly. "I've never done anything like this. I've never left this town for more than a few days. And I have responsibilities here. My family, the diner." Luke smiled softly. "You don't have to abandon anything," he said. "You just have to allow yourself to explore. You can always come back, and maybe, when you do, you'll see things differently. Sometimes stepping out changes everything, even if you don't realize it at first." Marissa felt tears prick her eyes again. She had spent so long thinking that her life was limited to the diner, to stirring pots and serving others, that she hadn't imagined she could choose something different. And now, with Luke standing beside her, she felt that choice could be real. For several nights after that conversation, Marissa lay awake, thinking about what she truly wanted. She thought about the roads Luke had traveled, the mountains he had seen, the rivers he had crossed. She imagined herself walking along trails, feeling the wind on her face, discovering new places, meeting new people. The fear was still there, strong and insistent, but beneath it was a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Finally, she realized that if she didn't take a step toward this unknown life, she would always wonder what might have been. And that thought of a life unlived felt heavier than any fear. She thought of Luke's words, of his quiet encouragement, and of the possibility that the world could hold something amazing just beyond the horizon. The next morning she prepared the diner as usual, but her mind was elsewhere. She moved through the motions, frying eggs, brewing coffee, arranging tables, but every task was accompanied by a sense of anticipation. When Luke arrived, she greeted him with a small, nervous smile, one that carried a new sense of determination. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, as she poured his coffee. Maybe I am ready. I don't know everything, but I think I want to try. Even if it's just for a little while." Luke's eyes lit up with a quiet joy. "That's all you need," he said. "Just a first step. Everything else will follow." For the first time in her life, Marissa felt a real sense of possibility. She wasn't just the girl who stirred pots anymore. She was someone who could choose, someone who could step into a life full of adventure, discovery, and connection. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she felt a quiet strength rising inside her, a strength she had never known she possessed. The diner continued its usual rhythm. The town of Red Willow went about its daily life. But for Marissa, everything had changed. She could feel it in her heart, in the way her hands moved, in the way the sunlight seemed brighter and the air seemed fresher. The first step toward a new life was within her grasp, and she was ready to take it. Luke smiled at her, sensing the change, and together they began to plan a journey that would take them far beyond the familiar streets and dusty fields of Red Willow. Marissa, once trapped in routine and doubt, was now standing on the edge of a new beginning, filled with hope, courage, and the thrilling promise of the unknown. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the sky painted with soft shades of pink and gold. Marissa stood at the edge of the diner, apron tied loosely around her waist, and took a deep breath. Today would be different. Today, she would leave the familiar comfort of Red Willow behind, if only for a while, and step into a life she had only dreamed of. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear, a mix she had never felt before. Luke arrived as promised, his horse tied outside and his bag slung over his shoulder. He had a calm, reassuring presence that made her feel braver than she knew she could be. He greeted her with a small smile. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Marissa nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said. She glanced back at the diner one last time, taking in the red booths, the gleaming counter, and the photographs on the walls. Memories of years spent cooking, cleaning, and serving the people of Red Willow flashed through her mind. She loved the diner and she loved her town, but she knew in her heart that she had to do this. She had to see what life could be beyond the streets she had always known. Luke helped her secure a small bag of essentials, things she might need along the way: clothes, a few books, and a notebook for her thoughts and sketches. She carried it close to her chest, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The horse, a strong and steady companion, seemed to sense her tension and nuzzled her gently. She smiled, feeling a connection with the animal, a kind of silent encouragement that made her feel less alone. As they set off down the dusty road, the diner and town slowly receding behind them, Marissa felt a strange thrill. The wind brushed her face, carrying the sense of the open fields, the distant forests, and the faint traces of earth and flowers. Every step of the horse's hooves on the ground echoed in her chest like a heartbeat, a reminder that she was alive in a new way. For hours they traveled through rolling hills and wide open fields. Marissa marveled at the changing scenery, the way sunlight danced across the grasses, the birds darting in the sky, and the way the wind seemed to carry away her doubts and fears. Luke rode beside her, pointing out small details along the way: a hidden grove of trees, a patch of wild flowers, the distant outline of mountains. He shared stories of travelers he had met, towns he had visited, and moments of quiet beauty he had experienced. Marissa listened, absorbing everything, feeling her heart expand with each story. When they stopped to rest by a small stream, Marissa knelt to fill her hands with water and splash her face. The coolness was refreshing, and she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. Luke dismounted and sat nearby, watching her with a calm smile. "You're doing well," he said. "The first day is always the hardest. But once you begin, the world shows itself in ways you could never imagine. From a window or a street corner." Marissa nodded, feeling a sense of pride and excitement. She looked at the flowing water, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the wide open sky. She realized that life had so many possibilities beyond the diner, beyond Red Willow, beyond everything she had known. It was a thrilling and sometimes frightening realization, but she welcomed it with an open heart. As they continued their journey, they encountered small towns and settlements along the way. Marissa was amazed by how different each place was, how the people had their own ways of living, speaking, and seeing the world. In one town, they watched children playing in the streets, their laughter carrying through the air. In another, a small market bustled with colors, smells, and sounds she had never experienced before. Luke encouraged her to talk to people, to ask questions, and to notice the little things. Every encounter, he told her, was a lesson, a story, and an opportunity to learn. Along the way, Marissa discovered new skills she didn't know she had. She helped Luke care for the horse, learned to read maps, and even tried her hand at basic repairs when a wagon wheel needed adjusting. Each small accomplishment filled her with confidence. She realized that she was capable of more than she had believed, that her life in the diner had prepared her in ways she hadn't understood. She could adapt, learn, and thrive outside the small town she had always known. The nights were magical. They camped under stars that seemed brighter and closer than anything she had ever seen. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine, earth, and wildflowers. Luke showed her how to build a small fire, and they cooked simple meals together, sharing laughter and stories as the flames danced. Marissa found herself opening up more, telling Luke about her dreams, her fears, and even her hopes for the future. He listened without judgment, offering encouragement and wisdom in equal measure. She felt a connection growing between them, a bond that went beyond friendship, built on trust, respect, and shared adventure. One evening, as they watched the sunset behind a distant mountain range, Marissa spoke softly. "I never knew life could feel like this," she said. "The world, it's so much bigger than I imagined. And yet, it feels like I was meant to see it, like I was waiting for this moment all my life." Luke smiled, his eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Life has a way of leading us to where we need to be," he said. "Sometimes we don't realize it until we take the first step." "You've been brave, Marissa. You've stepped into something new, and that's the hardest part. Everything else will follow." Days turned into weeks, and the journey continued. They crossed rivers, climbed hills, and explored forests that seemed untouched by time. Marissa's confidence grew with each passing day. She learned to trust her instincts, to navigate unfamiliar terrain, and to find joy in the simple moments of life on the road. She also discovered the quiet strength within herself, the resilience she had never known existed. Every challenge, every obstacle, became an opportunity to grow and learn. Along the way, they met people who left a lasting impression. There was an elderly woman who taught Marissa a new way to bake bread over an open fire, a young boy who showed her how to fish in a sparkling stream, and a family of travelers who shared stories of their own adventures. Each encounter reminded her that the world was full of kindness, wisdom, and wonder, waiting for those willing to seek it. Through it all, Luke remained a steady presence. He shared his knowledge, offered guidance, and celebrated her victories, no matter how small. But he also allowed her space to explore, to make mistakes, and to discover her own path. Marissa realized that this journey was not just about seeing new places, but about discovering who she truly was. One morning, after a long ride through rolling hills, they reached the edge of a vast canyon. Marissa stood at the edge, gazing down at the river that wound through the valley below. The view took her breath away. It was more beautiful and powerful than anything she had ever imagined. She felt a sense of awe, wonder, and gratitude all at once. "I never thought I'd see something like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Luke stood beside her, silent for a moment, letting her take it all in. "The world is full of moments like this," he said finally. "You just have to be willing to go out and find them." Marissa smiled. feeling a deep sense of peace. She had left behind her quiet life in Red Willow, stepped into the unknown, and discovered a world full of beauty, adventure, and possibility. She realized that the journey was only beginning, and that there were countless more experiences waiting for her, each one shaping her in ways she could not yet imagine. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Marissa felt a sense of completeness she had never known. She was no longer the girl who stirred pots in a small diner. She was an explorer, a learner, a woman discovering the vastness of life. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she felt ready, strong, and alive. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly live, to embrace change, to face fear, and to seek out the wonders of the world with an open heart. And beside her, Luke rode silently, sharing the journey, guiding her and walking with her into a life full of adventure, discovery, and endless possibility. The weeks on the road had changed Marissa in ways she could never have imagined. Each day had brought new lessons, new experiences, and a deepening sense of confidence she had never felt in Red Willow. She had learned to navigate rivers, climb hills, and handle challenges she once thought impossible. But more importantly, she had discovered the strength inside herself, the courage to face the unknown, and the willingness to embrace life fully. As they rode toward familiar territory, Marissa felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Returning to Red Willow after so long felt strange. She wondered if the town would notice the difference in her, if people would see her as the same Marissa who had spent her days quietly in the diner, or if they would recognize the woman who had grown in heart and spirit on the journey. Luke noticed her quiet reflection and nudged her gently with his elbow. "You've changed," he said softly, with a smile. "Not just on the outside, but inside too. You're ready for the next chapter, wherever that may take you." Marissa smiled, though a flicker of doubt still lingered. She had experienced freedom and adventure, but the idea of returning to her hometown brought both comfort and uncertainty. She loved the people and the diner, yet she knew she could never go back to the same life she had left. She had seen too much, learned too much, and grown too much to simply step back into old routines. When they reached the town, the streets were quiet in the late afternoon sun. Dust swirled gently around the wooden buildings, and familiar faces peeked out of windows or waved from porches. The diner came into view, its red booths and gleaming counter just as she had left them. Marissa's heart pounded. For years, this place had been her world, her anchor. Now it felt both familiar and new, a symbol of her past and a canvas for her future. She dismounted the horse and stood for a moment, breathing in the smell of the town, the baked bread, the faint hint of hay, and the warm air of summer. She felt a wave of gratitude for everything she had experienced, every lesson she had learned, and every moment that had led her here. Luke stood beside her silently, giving her space to gather her thoughts. The diner door jingled as she opened it, and a few regular customers looked up in surprise. Marissa smiled at them warmly, her presence carrying a quiet strength and confidence that had not been there before. She greeted them, served coffee and prepared meals, but there was a difference in the way she moved, a sense of purpose in every action. The diner felt alive in a new way, reflecting the growth she had undergone on her journey. Her mother noticed it first. "Marissa," she said softly, studying her daughter's face, You look different. Not just in appearance, but in the way you carry yourself." Marissa hugged her mother tightly. "I've learned a lot, Mom," she said. "I've seen places I never imagined, met people who taught me things I can't put into words, and discovered things about myself I didn't know before. I'm still me, but I'm also more than I was." Her father, standing quietly nearby, nodded with a proud smile. "It's good to see you happy," he said simply. "We always knew you had it in you." The days that followed were filled with both comfort and excitement. Marissa returned to the rhythm of the diner, but she carried a new energy with her. She experimented with recipes she had learned on the road, tried new flavors, and shared stories of her journey with curious customers. People were drawn to her in a different way now. She was no longer just a kind woman who served food. She was a storyteller, an adventurer, and someone who inspired others to believe in possibilities beyond their own routines. Luke continued to visit, sometimes riding in with supplies or sharing new stories from his travels. Their bond had deepened beyond friendship, rooted in shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. Together, they discussed plans for the future, ways to combine Marissa's love for cooking with the lessons she had learned on the road. They dreamed of small ventures, perhaps a food and cultural space where people could gather, learn, and connect. The possibilities felt endless, and for the first time, Marissa understood that life could be both meaningful and exciting at the same time. One afternoon, as they sat outside the diner watching the sun dip low over the hills, Marissa spoke softly. "I used to feel trapped," she said, "like my life would always be the same, stirring pots and following routines. But now I see that life is bigger. I can create, explore, and share in ways I never imagined. I'm grateful I had the courage to step out and see the world." Luke nodded, smiling. "You've grown in ways I can't even describe. You've discovered your strength, your creativity, and your heart. And the best part is, this is only the beginning. Life will continue to surprise you, and you're ready to embrace it." Marissa felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet happiness that came not from wealth or comfort, but from the knowledge that she had taken control of her life. She had faced fear, embraced change, and discovered that the world was full of opportunities for those willing to seek them. She had also discovered love, companionship, and a deep connection with someone who understood her in a way few ever could. In the weeks that followed, Marissa began working on her new venture. She opened a small space attached to the diner, where she could teach cooking, share stories of her travels, and celebrate the culture and traditions she had grown up with. The space became a place of learning, connection, and joy for the people of Red Willow. Children came to learn recipes and listen to tales of distant lands. Adults came to explore new flavors and hear stories that expanded their view of the world. Marissa felt a deep satisfaction in seeing others inspired and enriched by her experiences, which Luke was by her side throughout, helping, encouraging, and sharing in the excitement of building something meaningful. Their partnership was more than practical, it was emotional, rooted in trust, respect, and the shared journey that had brought them together. Marissa realized that this was what she had been searching for all along, a life where she could grow, create, and connect, surrounded by people who cared, and with someone who understood her heart. As the years passed, Marissa continued to expand her vision. She traveled occasionally, exploring new places, learning new recipes, and bringing back ideas to share with her community. The diner remained a cornerstone of her life, but it had transformed into something greater, a hub of creativity, culture, and connection. Marissa no longer felt trapped or limited. She had discovered her purpose and her power, and she had learned that life was always bigger than any fear or routine. One evening, as she prepared dinner in the diner, she paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the days she had spent stirring pots, feeling invisible and trapped, and the moment Luke had arrived, offering a path to something new. She smiled, realizing how far she had come, and how much life had changed because she had been brave enough to step into the unknown. The diner buzzed softly with conversation, laughter, and the smells of cooking. Marissa moved among the tables with ease, serving customers and sharing stories, but her heart was full of gratitude and joy. She had learned that life was not just about what you did every day, but about the choices you made, the courage you found, and the people you shared it with. As she looked at Luke sitting nearby and smiling as he watched her work, Marissa felt a deep sense of completeness. The lonely girl who had whispered, "All my life I've only stirred pots," was gone. In her place stood a woman who had discovered the world, herself, and the beauty of connection. She had taken the first step, embraced change, and found a life richer than she could have imagined. The sun set over Red Willow, casting a warm, golden light over the town, the diner, and the lives within it. Marissa stood at the window for a moment, watching the horizon and feeling the quiet power of her own journey. She had learned that the world was vast, full of wonder, and waiting for those willing to explore. And she knew deep in her heart that life would continue to surprise her, challenge her, and inspire her in ways she could never predict. Marissa smiled, returning to her work, her heart light and her spirit free. She had discovered that stirring pots was not the end of her story. It had been the beginning. The world was open, and she was ready for everything it had to offer. Hand in hand with the cowboy who had shown her the courage to step into the unknown. And so, life went on in Red Willow, brighter, fuller, and more meaningful than ever before. Marissa's journey had transformed not only her life, but the lives of those around her, leaving a legacy of courage, discovery, and the simple truth that it is never too late to follow your heart and embrace the world beyond what you know.